Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the CSBG Annual Report. For those who may not know me, I am Katie Kajowski, NASCSP Research Director. This webinar will be presented by Seth Hassett, Director of Division of State Assistance at the Office of Community Services, Denise Harlow, CEO of the Community Action Partnership, Jarl Walker, Director of Training and Technical Assistance from the Partnership, Barney, Director of the Association of Nationally Certified ROMA Trainers and a consultant with NASCSP, and Lauren Cook, Deputy Director of NASCSP. Again, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. All of these are on mute. If you have questions during the webinar, you can ask questions using the chat option on the webinar toolbar. The tool is on the right-hand side of your screen, and you'll see a text box where you can type a question. Please select all panelists to ensure that all of our presenters can see your questions. Questions will be read aloud and answered during the Q&A portions of the webinar. In order to keep to our schedule, if we have time for all questions, we will compile your questions into an FAQ following the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and will be posted to the NASCSP website. We also have a PDF version of the slides that we will be sending to you via chat function in the webinar. The agenda for today is to discuss ROMA Next Generation and the CSBG Annual Report. We'll review modules 2 through 4, discuss tools and resources, and discuss preparing for data collection and reporting. Before we begin, I'd like to turn it over to Denise Harlow for a brief welcome from the partnership. Denise?
Thanks, Katie. Hello, everyone. Glad that you are on this afternoon or this morning's webinar, depending on where you are across the country today. As you know, the partnership, NASCSP and OCS have been working diligently to try to make sure that the network is ready for the rollout of the CSBG Annual Report, ROMA Next Generation, all of these components. And seeing the numbers on today's webinar, it really looks like folks are engaged, wanting as much information as possible, and really wanting to get this new year kind of started off on the right footing. So thank you so much for being on today. We know that we're going to dive into a bunch of different information today. Today's webinar will provide somewhat of an overview, and we'll talk later in the webinar about follow-up deep dive webinars into specific modules. So whether you're a July 1 start date, an October 1 start date, or a January 1st start date, agencies, now is the time to prepare. Now is the time to make sure we put our foot on the pedal of gas and get our agencies, our data systems, and our staff trained up. We are ready to go, and thank you again for being part of today's webinar. That I'll turn it back over to you, Katie.
Thank you so much, Denise. Now I'd like to introduce Seth Hassett from the Office of Community Services, who will get us started today.
Hey, thank you, and good afternoon, good morning and thank you all for joining this webinar. We appreciate your involvement as we prepare for the weekend for the upcoming 4th of July holiday. NASCSP worked to host this webinar and the involvement of Connection Partnership and other partners, and for the invitation to give a brief welcome. We're making significant progress in the implementation of a multi-tiered performance management framework for the Community Services Block Grant. And for those of us who have now had several years of work in this effort, it's great that we're continuing to make progress and significant progress in the implementation. And before we get into an in-depth discussion of the ongoing work with ROMA Next Generation and the annual report, I wanted to do a few milestones and recent accomplishments. This all states submitted an online administrative report, what we are calling Module 1 of the annual report. And this was a major accomplishment, and we very much appreciate the hard work and efforts of all of the state CSBG directors who helped make this happen. For the time, we have available state-level information that can compare responses in state CSBG plans with responses in the annual report. And we all know there were challenges and glitches along the way, but we were able to successfully pre-populate the annual report with information from state plans. And our OCS worked extremely hard at this effort too, and we learned a great deal along the way. So We now have baseline information related to many of the state accountability measures, and we've even begun providing substantive feedback to states, such as snapshot related to the organizational standards that can be used in planning and thinking about next year's CSBG state plans. And we're going to be talking more about that in future sessions. We're also moving forward with next rounds of the American Customer Satisfaction Index survey, and that's the survey of all eligible entities, and it's in the field right now. We are seeing good participation rates in most states, but we're continuing to encourage participation nationwide. So if you've received a CFI email, we just strongly encourage you to put your input. We will also be doing an ACSI survey, Customer Satisfaction Index survey, in the next few months regarding OC2 states and our direct grantees regarding OCS customer service. We have to be proud of, and we know there are lots of adaptive challenges ahead. As we're already implementing other sections of the annual report, but while Mod 2, 3, and 4, state agencies and local eligible entities, the community action agencies, are critical players in the adaptation of data systems and print of content. And all of this effort will only be worth it if we continue to develop and use the capacity to analyze results and make meaningful changes in the services and strategies to meet the needs of individuals, families, and communities we serve. This is a time of budget uncertainty, and it can be difficult to look beyond the next few months. But active performance management across this national network requires a long-term and continuous improvement focus. And it requires that we're clear-eyed in identifying better improvement and that we set challenging goals for ourselves. As we move forward with ROMA Next Generation and the next components of the annual report, we'll also be looking at updates to our national performance measures for the Government Performance and Results Act process. And there obviously are, we don't control in the budget process, but we have a good story to tell. And we'll look for ways to get your input as we tell the story of CSBG performance management. So thanks again to all who are on this call for all the work you're doing. I'm going to hand things back over to NASCSP.
Hello, it's Barbara Mooney, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about how we're building on the foundation of ROMA that we've been working with over the past dozen years, and building what has been known as ROMA Next Generation. What do we mean by that? Well, we really mean that we want to improve the performance management and measurement of the CSBG areas and to demonstrate continuous quality improvement across the complex system. Is our over 1,000 community action agencies, state associations, and state CSBG offices. We're reinforcing our commitment to understanding the outcomes that are produced by this complex system, while also strengthening the local solutions for families and communities. And we know that all of these things are dependent upon strong and robust agencies, and so ROMA will continue to look at building agency capacity for the long term. The things that are new as we move forward, the adoption of a national community action theory of change that I'm going to talk about here in a minute, and also support local theories of change that help agencies understand the relationship between their own needs assessments and the things that they plan to do, take changes that are consistent with the national theory of change. We're renewing our understanding that we have to work towards community change as well as family and agency outcomes, and we need to focus on the collection and analysis of data at an improved level, and that includes both the new annual report that has OMB clearance and also the data use at the local levels and at the state levels at every point of the full ROMA cycle. And finally, we want to be clear about the necessity to integrate the phases of the ROMA cycle. So change. This is a new part. Well, we've been thinking about it for several years, but let's think about why we need it. This is the theory of change. It really articulates our underlying assumptions, the beliefs and assumptions that really guide the complex service delivery system that we spoke about before. It's why and how of the activities, and then it's really about what changes and what are the improvements that are produced. We feel this national statement is very, very important to set the stage for what we do in our network, and we know that it should be adopted for specific local needs and those specific approaches at the local CA level. Needed. Since 2011, we've been working on reforms to improve outcomes for individuals and communities, and so we wanted to be sure that we could articulate that focus and identify those things we believe are the network's national goals. And we highlight some of the uniqueness of community action. And as we know, it's very difficult to talk about what community action is when you have 1,000 different approaches to it. So this was thought to be able to help uncomplicate the system to make it easier to understand. So we started back in 2012 to get network feedback about the importance of the vision, the values of the Community Action Network, while looking at fresh and innovative thinking. And so a graphic, well, we came up with some language for the graphic, and then we came up with a graphic. You have seen, this was the graphic that was included in the OMB clearance for the annual report, and it's been updated a bit, and as we see on the next slide, which hopefully makes it cleaner and clearer to see the community action goals at the top clearly stated, with some graphics that show the range of communities across the country. The services and strategies are identified now that match the domain areas of the annual report, and so that's important. The rest of the wording is the same on this graphic. So you'll see it says close to final. We're looking for any input from you about the graphic at a separate time. I said the national theory of change really is the big picture framework for us. Know that one of the foundations of community action is that local agencies respond to local needs. So we're going to help agencies create their own local theories of change that will really reflect the needs assessment, the strategic planning, the community action plan, and the specific outcomes that the local agency is going to meet. And we have a couple documents to help that. We have the NASCSP Guide to Creating a Local Theory of Change that's posted on the NASCSP website, and we're working on a curriculum module that will be released by the partnership that will help agencies walk through the creation of a local theory of change. And I think now I'm turning over to Katie. No, over to Jarl.
Yes.
Yes, hello everyone. This is Jarl Crocker, Director of Training and Technical Assistance at the Community Action Partnership. Thanks for that, Barbara. And I want to talk a little bit about where are we now in the schedule of implementing ROMA Next Generation, make sure that everybody is on the same page about that schedule of implementation, and then give a couple of tips for things that folks can do to make sure that they're ready to have that transition go as smoothly as possible. So to start out with the overall performance management framework, I want to make sure everybody has that big picture in mind and understands how all these different pieces fit and work together. Local organizational standards are obviously assessed with all of our agencies and form the backbone of making sure that management and operations meet certain basic standards to show the quality of our work and that we are a good investment of public revenues. State and federal accountability measures are the counterpart at the level of the state offices and the Office of Community Services. And then also the results-oriented management and accountability system, as Barbara was just talking about, is the common network-wide framework to make sure that our agencies are focused on the results and use that full ROMA cycle in their work, which is obviously closely connected with ROMA Next Generation and the new annual report. ROMA Next Generation, as we have just been talking about, is the next iteration of this framework. It's not I think it's a continuation of what we've been doing, obviously with some key differences. That's one of the things that we're here to talk about, but this is a continuation of the overall ROMA framework with which you're already familiar, and I think an overall improvement to our ability to report and track the data that will show the outcomes that our agencies are able to achieve. The CSBG Annual Report includes those updated and refined sets of outcome measures. It allows our agencies to report on a broader range of outcomes, and so while that does come with the need for preparation on the part of our agencies, I think overall as a network, it gives us greater ability to accurately report on the outcomes that have been achieved, and again, show the impact of the work of our agencies from the local to the state to the national level. Now I want to talk a little bit about where we are in terms of the implementation process. So the CSBG Annual Report received its 3-year clearance on January 12, 2017. So we are already into the implementation phase of ROMA Next Generation. I'll talk a little bit about what's been going on with state offices, but local agencies might not always see what's going on at the state level. So I just want to emphasize that we are already implementing ROMA Next Generation and the annual report, and I want to make sure everyone understands where we are in this process. And so as the slide concludes, this starts the phase-in of that process. Go ahead. So just to review where we've been and where we are now. Again, as the slide says, on January 12th, the CSBG Annual Report was officially cleared by OMB. Moving into February, we began planning and preparation for Module 1, which is completed by state offices. So there were a number of TNTA webinars, and there was beta testing of that first module. And then we move into March 2017 when Module 1 went online, so the states began to use Module 1, and NASCSP also convened the Data Task Force. And the Data Task Force is a group of diverse stakeholders drawn from across the network at all levels to provide feedback on the ongoing implementation of ROMA Next Generation and the annual report, and to make sure that their voices are heard and provide feedback for the process. Moving into April of 2017, just a few months ago, the states uploaded their data into Module 1. So again, you see the beginning of the implementation of the new system. And then in June of 2017, that data was completed. the uploads are done, so that data is already being processed. The data task force met in person for the first time, again, to continue to gather that critical feedback from the network, and additional instruction manuals are in process to help both state offices and our local agencies. So I think this just underscores the fact that we are already fully in implementation. Moving forward, as Denise said at the outset, states are on basically 3 different schedules. One set of states starts on July 1, which would seem to be tomorrow. So I think that's a very important message to all of our agencies out there. Make sure that you're clear about what schedule your state is on, because some of you are beginning the process of collecting data according to the new annual report as of tomorrow. Other states start in October, on October 1st. Others start on January 1st. So make sure that you're clear, that you know what cycle you're on, and when you need to begin to really think about how you're collecting that data and you've got everything in place. So hopefully the states that are on that July 1st cycle are already prepared and are ready to begin collecting the data they need to report in the new annual report system.
And Denise, I'll just jump in here, and you'll see here from this slide that if you look in that middle row, federal fiscal year 2017, right, that's where we are in progress right now. It's June 30th, 2017. So again, you are currently going to be using the IS survey for the rest of this program fiscal year, if you're under this time frame. And then if you look down another row, that for federal fiscal year 18, as Jarl says, starting October 1, you would begin collecting, but you can also then see when you would be reporting in terms of the timeline there as well.
So underlying message is the time is now.
Yes.
All right. So we just want to provide a couple of tips to make sure that everybody is on the same page and moving forward as you begin the implementation process. So at the agency level, more that you've identified a point person or preferably a team of folks to begin making sure that you're in your data, that your intake forms have been updated, that you've reviewed done that crosswalk between the old IS and the new annual report, and you've got a clear process and structure in place to make sure your agency is prepared to report on that data. Next, make sure that you fully research modules 2 through 4. NASCSP has a very helpful document on their website that crosswalks the old IS with the new annual report, showing what's changed and what stayed the same. That's one of the best ways to make sure that you know what changes are applicable to your agency based on what you're reporting and what you need to get prepared for. Do you need to change the way you do, change certain categories on your intake form? Do you need to do some training of your staff in other data collection processes? Next, make sure that you've identified any training and technical assistance needs based on the work of your point person or your team in doing that review, and that you're communicating those both to your state association and your state office. We already know a number of states around the country have been holding conference calls and webinars with their agencies to walk through the process, to talk about any issues that have come up as you've done the crosswalk, looked at those new reporting requirements. So make sure that you're clearly communicating your training and technical assistance needs and participating in those opportunities, webinars like this one, and hopefully webinars, conference calls, and related meetings at your state level, hopefully sponsored by either or your state office and your state association, to make sure you're communicating those TNTA needs and getting the support that you need. For state associations and state offices, obviously the ones out there that are already pulling their agencies together to look at their TNTA needs, to talk through the new reporting requirements, I think that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And for those that haven't done that yet, I think that's a critical role at the state level to make sure you're providing those forums instead of having each agency go agency by agency answering their questions or identifying their TNTA needs. national level. Obviously, the national partners are continue to be committed to making sure our agencies and our state associations and state offices have the support that they need, and so we'll continue to offer webinars, training opportunities at the partnership and NASCSP conferences, in addition to other national partner conferences, and coming out and doing trainings to your state. So make sure that you're availing yourself of all of those resources. And then lastly, I think a closing message for this section, it's crucially important that we work together. And I think that graphic is a great illustration of how the local agencies should be working with their state offices and state associations, vice versa, and also the national partners working at all levels to provide that training and technical assistance. So I think if we continue to collaborate, work together, and clearly communicate, we can make this transition as smooth as possible. But again, concluding message, make sure that you know what cycle you're on if you are an agency on this call, so you know when the rubber meets the road and you're fully into using that new reporting system.
This is Katie Kachowski from NASCSP again. As everybody could see in that former slide, the data task force was on each of those cogs. Folks aren't familiar with the data task force. Next slide. Stands for the Data Analysis and Technical Assistance Task Force. This is that was convened by NASCSP to assist OCS and NASCSP in understanding and addressing the CSBG network's data needs, including collection and storage, use of data for analysis, and continual improvement of results. This task force is a consultative body. It's focused on transition from the CSBG IS to this annual report. We're on that phase-in process that we've been talking about. The group is also charged with providing ongoing assistance in the implementation of the annual report, and all charged with creating a data-oriented culture, which we plan to do through communication. You can see from this map of the United States, we have this who's represented in data task force. The circles are state offices, the triangles are state associations, and the stars are your local CAAs. We have all regions represented on the task force. Again, local agencies, state associations, state offices, and national partners. We received over 110 applications from that work for folks to be on this task force. So really great to see that kind of excitement and folks wanting to get involved. We've got a great group of people. We had our first in-person meeting at the same week as the Cap Law Conference in June. We've got a lot of work under belts that we've started and a lot of work ahead of us. And it's just a great group of people to be working with. Next slide. The work that we're doing, this group has been provided with the draft instruction manuals that we have right now for modules 2 and 4. Module 3 is in process. They're providing feedback on those documents. They're also taking a look at data analysis. Remember, part of ROMA Next Generation is that greater emphasis on analysis and evaluation. And this group is helping us work through some of that, talking about what analysis of the IS currently takes place, how we can do that with the new annual report, how they use data, and just looking at data in a new way. They're also going to be helping with communication, which what Jarl talked about is critical in implementation of the new annual report. So you'll be seeing some tools coming out of this group and just things down the road from this group. Next slide. Now, getting into the CSBG Annual Report and the IS Report. See, we're moving from the CSBG IS Report to the Annual Report. We found that under the CSBG IS Report, there were some things missing. We hope to address those with the new Annual Report. That have been added that you will see as new in this annual report is the ability to report on services and strategies. So now we'll have data on state and federal accountability measures. An annual report that actually makes the performance management system real. See data on organizational standards coming out. We have additional community level NPIs, and we've separated out community and family NPIs. You'll have the ability to show progress over time on that community level work, something that has been really hard for the network to do. You work on something for years and years, and then you report one after 5 years of hard work. The new annual report also has additional infrastructure for multi-level data analysis, and it's received OMB clearance for 3 years. Next. 4 modules in the annual report: State Administration Module, Module 1, Module 2, CSBG Eligible Entity Expenditures, Capacity and Resources, Module 3 is the Community Level Module, and Module 4, where the individual and family level indicators will live. We're going to talk briefly about these modules, and I'm going to turn it over to OCS now to talk about Module 1.
Hi, I'm Seth Hassett. So Module focuses on state administration, and as we shared, this is actually fully underway and being implemented, and we have one round of input for this module. So Module 1, the station section is similar to sections A through D in the CSBG IS, which is completed by CSBG administrators or their designees. It is all information based on a federal fiscal year and includes information on the state administration of CSBG funding, use of administrative funds and discretionary funds, and as we mentioned, we are now able to look at a comparison of planned fund use and actual use. Next slide. Module 1, this is shows that it includes information on the progress of eligible entities in meeting organizational standards. And as we mentioned, we, for the time now, have data to share with states about the progress that entities have made. And each year we'll be looking at that, the continuous improvement model, to see how we're doing in terms of meeting the percentage of standards. And also this is useful for identifying areas of technical assistance needs. Information on the progress the state is making with its accountability measures, and including information about the targets related to the American Customer Satisfaction Index, and important information on what the state is doing in monitoring and oversight, what improvement plans have been put in place, and the overall support system for states and for the community action agencies to have a continuous improvement model. Next slide. So this shows that there are crosswalk and between the items of the CSBG and where they are reflected in Module 1 of the state plan. I won't walk through each of these, but this is available for you to review. So we are, again, we will hand over to Nat to talk about the Module 2 of the annual report.
It's Barbara again. When we think about Modules 2, 3, and 4, I think it's important for us to contextualize the relationship between these modules. I like to think of Module 2 as the agency module, Module 3 as community, and Module 4 as family and individual, to keep in ROMA framework discussion. So in Module 2, you'll see that combined in this module are all of the things related to agency capacity that used to be in other sections of the IS report in the past. So there are some things that are similar to sections E and F, and there's about Section A is the requirement for the total amount of CSBG funding expended. Section B is agency capacity building. that has to do with funding sources and other resources. You'll see the resources there that include volunteer hours. And Section C is data on others that are allocated to and administered by the eligible entity. Next slide. So there's a little crosswalk in this slide that shows where things used to be. So Section E of the IS report is now in Section A, and it's the expenditures by service category. And then there are several things that used to be in performance indicators under goals 2, 3, 4, and 5 they were really agency focused, and in the new theory of change, there are 3 national goals. Agencies are not one of them, so information is included here in the agency capacity building piece. Section C is about the resources that are administered and generated by the network. Next. So detail of Section A with the CSBG expenditures, where you're first talking about the reporting period, and you're looking at the domain areas. And as I said, these are the domain areas that have been identified in the annual report. You'll see them in this module, you'll see them in Module 3, and you'll see them in Module 4, and you'll see them in the theory of change. An added section, this is new, where I want to capture CSBG funded activities that build capacity, agency capacity, specifically those around needs assessment, strategic planning, data management and reporting, and training and technical assistance, as there are foundational pieces for agency capacity, and you'll see there's also an other. It used to be a part of the NPIs. It's now in this section for a close-up of the agency capacity, as it has to do with staff qualifications and training and certifications. So there's a list here of most commonly cited credentials in the network. And this is virtually unchanged section that's to do with the financial capacity of your agency. Module 2 in the chat box, and we'll come back to them at the end. Talk briefly about the community level module, which is Module 3. Really collects information on the community level initiatives. It shows the connection between initiatives and the outcomes, and also with strategies that are used to meet the outcomes. It really shows that community initiatives are often designed to be reported over time, and so with adjustments for that in this module. Places that will be auto-populated when information gets carried over from year to year. So the first year you'll be entering things that you'll see again in the second year. And we don't expect that agencies will have a lot of these community level change initiatives. So we're looking for a handful of initiatives, and we're looking for those things the agency is doing at the community level. So there's some new things. The community initiative status form that has some relationship to the old reporting of partnerships, where you're reporting just the number of partnerships. In the initiative form, you're actually connecting partnerships to specific outcomes in the initiative form. There are a series of national performance indicators, some of which are the same as those that were found in Goals 2 and 3 previously, and some that are very new. And there's a new section of strategies that really allows agencies to talk about what they're doing. I think of these as the three parts of what we've been talking about. We're talking about what is the customer, who is the community that's being served. That community initiative status form really provides the profile of the community. I think that's the next slide, maybe. Oh, no, it's not. So community initiative status form identifies the profile of the community. So like the demographics that you see later in the family level module, in the community level, we want to get a sense of who the community is, what does it look like, how is it, what are the demographics, so to speak, of that community. And those are the things that will be included on the initiative form. Okay, next. Sure, that we have always been about community level work, and so it's important to know that that's founded in our funding, our foundational funding document. It's included in the purposes and goals statements. We really are revitalizing low-income communities, and as well as empowering low-income families and individuals. It's about how we move at both of those levels, and then we use innovation and effective community-based approaches. So we've always been about community. I think our recent look at it is that we haven't spent as much time honing our indicators here, and so it's time to focus on this. And so it's renewal of our understanding of the necessity of working to community changes, as well as just working at the individual or family level. And so this is really the reporting space where we're hoping to be able to tackle those complex issues that face us. I thought this was coming up, sorry. The initiative status form, we're talking about what's the program, what's the goal, and then what's the community? Is it a neighborhood? Is it a school district? How long do you think it will be? And then who else is involved? What other types of partnerships are involved in your initiative? So you're doing kind of a profile here. You're including the kinds of partners, and then you're talking about the strategies that you're going to use. How are you going to meet your need? And then the number 12 is a place for progress, where if this is a fear, of course, you're just setting your outcomes and your targets, but in fears you'll be talking about progress. And what is the impact, and then is it a final status, and then some lessons learned. So this form is kind of a summary for each initiative, and you'll be creating one of these forms for each of the different initiatives that your agency may be involved in at the community level. In the module, if you can see this, you can make it bigger on your own screen. It shows that in this module, we're looking at both counts of change and rates of change at the community level. So when you're looking at how many jobs or how many units of housing, you can count those. And we're hoping that as we become more sophisticated in the community level work arena, that we'll be able to see how those numbers of counts are really impacting rates of change in our community that are affecting the larger picture of things in our community. Part to this is a community strategy list. It's a way of getting you to think about the kinds of things that you are doing that are community level strategies. And these were created from a lot of input from the field, but there's another category in each, so we're anxious to see the kinds of things that people add to the strategies list if you don't find something that's there already. I think at that point I'm turning it over for discussion about individuals and family level in Module 4.
Thanks, Barbara, and hello everyone. This is Lauren Cook from NASCSP, and we're going to focus now on Module 4. That's the module that really hones in on our individual and family level work. Now, we talked a lot about how there's a renewed focus on connecting outcomes, services, and people in ROMA Next Generation. And in Module 4, that's where we really see 3 sections that focus on just those 3 items. So we do collect information about outcomes. So we're looking at the change that happens in people's lives. Examples of outcomes could be finding employment, completing education, or securing housing. And outcomes are reported in the National Performance Indicators. We will focus on services that are provided to participants. It's a whole separate section specifically on the services. So it could be things such as job training, work experience, scholarships. And then, of course, we also have a section on the people that we're serving. Just as we do in the CSBG survey, the annual report will collect demographic and characteristic data. This includes the common demographic data like gender, age, race, ethnicity, and then we have some new categories like military status and job status. I want to emphasize that we are still collecting an unduplicated count, just like we do in the CSBG survey in Section G. Wondering how the annual report kind of lines up or aligns with the CSBG survey, because a lot of these pieces aren't new. So this is a high-level crosswalk that we've been coming back to throughout the webinar, and we see that we have these 3 sections. Section A, the National Performance Indicators. On the right side, we see which NPIs in the IS survey align with that section. And you can see there are quite a few. For Section B, specifically on the services, you can see that there are a lot of services we're already reporting on in the IS survey. For Section C, the new all characteristics report in the annual report aligns with Section G, the program participant characteristics. We're probably wondering what's new in the annual report. On your screen, you see just a snapshot of one of the reporting forms on the National Performance Indicators. Like in Module 3, the NPIs and the services are organized by domains. In Module 4, so this is just an example of the employment domain. On the left side, we have examples of those indicators. And in column 1, that's where you would report the number of participants served. Column 2, where you'd report your target. A target is asked for all of the NPIs included in Module 4. And then column 3, you'd report your actual results. And then when you look at columns 4 and 5, it's a little bit hard to see on the screen here, but those are kind of shaded out because those will be auto-calculated for you. In column 4, that's where we'll see the percentage of participants who achieve the outcome, and column 5, the performance target accuracy. I just want to emphasize that just as with Module 3, all of these indicators are kind of a menu, and you only report on the ones that reflect your work and the outcomes that you're working toward. And then the services list. This is a new list in the annual report because it's separated out of the NPI. This is where we focus on the things that we're delivering to individuals and families. You may have noticed in the past that in the survey, we have our outputs and outcomes kind of mixed together. So the services are mixed in with some of the NPIs. That's one of the newest parts of Module 4 is that we've separated those out. And we've done that so we can have a better understanding and tell a better story about how services are really achieving results for participants we're serving. So on the next, an example of the services, and this is just a snapshot of the housing domain, services listed on the left side, and on the right, you would report an unduplicated number of the individuals served for each of those service categories. And then section in Module 4, this is on characteristics and demographics. This is the all characteristics report, which looks somewhat similar to what you're reporting in Section G of the CSBGIS. On this slide, you see we've highlighted elements that are new or revised. There's a full version of this available on our website. And this is something that we'll take a deeper dive into when we get to those Module 4 specific webinars. I'm going to talk a little bit about data analysis. Jarl, I believe you're up for this one.
Well, I think Denise is going to take this part of it.
Oh, Lauren. Well, and Lauren ended her section there, I think, with a key reminder. There are going to be some deep dive webinars on Module 3 and Module 4. Those are the big kahunas, as it were, and we know that there are going to be a lot of specific questions about exactly how on the community side and then how on the family and individual side do these components roll out compared to what we currently do and what we will need to do. So as you've seen in our e-newses, hopefully that there will be webinars from Module 3 will be offered 3 different times, and the webinars from Module 4 will be offered 3 different times. So if you missed a few things in this section, don't worry. Those deep dive webinars will certainly cycle back. Here you'll see the ROMA cycle, and sometimes we're in training sessions, and I've been with Barbara, and I've been with Jackie and Lauren, and sometimes we say, when is it time to really drop next generation? Because early in a lot of this process, people say, well, what's going to change? Do we get ROMA training now, or do we wait? Do we get certification now, or do we wait? And we always said, continue to move forward. What is ROMA? ROMA isn't necessarily just about NPIs. ROMA is about this cycle. It's an element of ROMA Next Generation that will carry forward, and is kind of the outcome of this whole process, is an improved process that the network is doing great data analysis. We've talked in training sessions about what performance measurement is, certainly around the NPIs, and then performance management. ROMA cycle really helps us to do a better performance management of our system. Our assessment stage, we move to planning oftentimes, whether that's strategic planning, then developing a CAP plan for our implementation. We document our achievement of results through the NPIs, and we're to evaluate our results. Go to the next slide. You'll see in this slide available, I believe, up on the NASCSP website, and we can certainly get it out to folks. This really has been from day one on this modernization of our performance management system, is really to make sure we see a thread through each of these components on the ROMA cycle. You do your assessment, design directly into your planning. It's not a siloed event. It's not a one and done. It doesn't sit on a shelf somewhere. That needs assessment really does need to feed into your planning process. Now, your planning process we would probably see as multi-layered, right? You have strategic planning, macro planning for your agency. Then you have your CAP plan, which is much more of your operationally derived plan. And both of those pieces, you should be able to see threads back to your community assessment. We plan, and then we implement a series of strategies and services, as you heard here earlier today, right? We're going to deploy community-based strategies. We're going to deploy family and individual services, high-quality services that we know are going to be impactful in our communities. We go through our achievement of results, and that's really where we're modernizing our NPIs. We've reordered them, we've tightened up some of the language, we've expanded some of them, we've increased perhaps our data collection on veterans in terms of the demographic pieces. We move to evaluation and data analysis and making sure that all along the ROMA cycle we're considering our analysis. And I've talked with many of you in the field, and I know program managers know your programs inside and out. You oftentimes know exactly kind of what's going on in your program. However, when we talk about CSBG performance management and community action performance management, it really is agency as a whole. What do we really do to look at the myriad of services that families receive to see if it's making a difference in their individual lives, are our community efforts making a difference at the community level. And so when you reflect on Module 3, there are different ways to collect that information, but it's that analytical piece that we're really trying to push through Next Gen. We go to the next slide. I guess one of the takeaways here is to make sure that we remember that these things don't necessarily happen in silos. We talk about program silos. We want to make sure that our ROMA cycle is not also siloed. Our assessment or our key assessment process might happen on a standardized schedule, but we know that you're oftentimes talking to parents who are involved, whose kids are involved in your program. You're doing customer satisfaction surveys throughout the course of the year. You're talking to people on a regular basis. That stuff doesn't happen when you do your assessment once every 3 years. It happens periodically. You're continually planning, and then you'll bounce over to evaluation because rapid evaluation cycles call us to maybe move something in our program or shift something or shift to a different location in our community, to ramp something up or slow something down. You're continually moving in all of those different directions. I think one of the key pieces here is to remember this isn't a kind of a one and done. And the slides are just flying. All right. Let's go to the next slide. And I think this stuff really the idea here is that you can see the thread. If you go to your community action plan, everything that you're doing in your CAP plan should be able to be found somewhere in your needs assessment. If you're deploying program strategies, community level strategies that are not found in your assessment, in that evaluation phase, you need to analyze, where are we deploying these services? Do they make sense? As we analyze our data, should we be redirecting our resources to more impactful programs based on our needs assessment? And certainly we tie all of these pieces together, right? So we have our assessment, we have the agency strategic plan, feeds into the CAP plan for the agency in terms of operationalizing the work. All that gets fed into the CSBG state plan that's going to be due here in September for the state. They have a plan, and then at the end of the year, we have our annual report, the before and the after. That then will feed into what's on the annual report. How well did you do in terms of meeting expectations? What were your actual results? How did you do on org standards? What TNTA was offered? And so all that gets fed into the congressional report. And I'm about that last piece of the pie and what goes in that first element of this cycle, right up there at the needs assessment, feeds directly into what goes into the congressional report. So we want to make sure that folks see how all these pieces tie together is one of the critical elements of ROMA Next Gen. I'm going to turn it back over to Katie to talk about resources and tools.
Denise, actually this is Lauren. I'll talk a little bit about the resources and tools. But before we get into that, just want to remind everyone that if you have questions, please enter them into the chat. We will be able to answer a few as we come to the close of the webinar. So we'll keep an eye on that and watch your questions come in. But want to make sure that everyone is aware of what these tools are, where to find them, and how they might be helpful. We know that every kind of at different stages of getting familiar with this report or getting prepared to report on it. One of our kind of must-have tools that we want to make sure you take a look at is this annotated CSBG Annual Report. So what we've done is actually go through every page of the new annual report and make a little notation, as you see in red on the screen, how this might align with the CSBGIS survey. We've also identified what's new and not very similar to what was in the CSBGIS. Another must-have tool is the CSBGIS CSBG Annual Report Crosswalk. It was developed based off of recommendations from the field. We've used it in a few states in our trainings. And what this tool does is look at the indicators that are listed in the CSBGIS survey, and then crosswalk what indicators in the new annual report would best align with those. So you know that you've been reporting on 1.1A in the CSBGIS. We give them recommendations of what indicators you might be able to report on in the annual report. So I encourage you to take a look at one as well. And next we have kind of an announcement and a kind of response to some feedback that we received from the network. We've provided a new numbering system for the CSBG Annual Report. Over the past few months, we've heard from the field that it was really important for every data piece to have its own number in the new report. So we've established a new numbering system. This is an example of how we've renumbered some of the indicators. This is available in an Excel format on our website. Now it only lives in that document, but we'll be updating all of the other tools, resources, and formats with this new numbering as we move forward. So please take a look at this. We've worked with a lot of different groups to vet the numbering and think that it'll really help everyone as we move forward. Now, there are some of the tools that we already have available, but want you to know some other tools that are kind of in the works, in development right now. We are working on developing an additional crosswalk that crosswalk the annual report with LIHEAP, Head Start, WIOA, and weatherization. We, of course, have our webinar series running throughout this month. And one of the biggest pieces that we're working on are the instructions, manuals, and lexicon for all of the modules in the annual report. Instruction manual for Module 1 is already available on our website. We're working very hard on the instructions for Modules 2 through 4 to make sure that they're properly vetted, they're clear, they answer as many of your questions as we can in the instructions manual. So we are working with groups like the Data Task Force to make sure that those are as clear as possible. We'll also work with beta testers as we move forward. We know that it's really important for you to have access to those, but again, want to make sure that they're as clear and helpful as possible. So where can you find all of these tools? We've been sending out some links throughout the webinar. Hopefully you've been able to visit this page already, but we've done some reorganizing of our website to hopefully make it easier for you to find all of these tools. It might take a little bit if you were used to our other format, but we now have a separate CSBG Annual Report page that has resources really focused on the reporting. And then on the next slide, this is just an example of all of the tools and resources that you'll find on that page. Of another page specific on ROMA Next Generation. And that's where you would find more information as it's available on the theory of change, what is ROMA Next Generation, and some other tools. To promote the CSBG TNTA Resource Center, this is managed between the partnership and NASCSP. We're both posting all of our resources to this TNTA Center to make sure that you can have all of this at your fingertips. You create an email and password for login, but it's not mandatory to be able to access the resource bank. So really want to encourage everyone to use the Resource Center. Okay, so the close of the webinar, we have a couple questions that have come in, but please enter any additional ones that you might have. And then we have our contact information listed here. If you think of some other questions after the webinar, please feel free to contact Katie, Jackie, or myself with your questions. So just with our Q&A, we did receive a question about where can I find definitions or instructions for the domains, indicators, and other parts of the annual report. Katie, do you want to talk a little bit more about those instructions manuals?
Sure. Thanks, Lauren. As we've mentioned throughout the webinar, we are in process of developing, vetting, and finalizing an instruction manual for the new CSBG Annual Report, specifically modules 2 through 4. We hope to have a draft out to the network in July. We're also putting together a new lexicon along with that, but that will be released after that instruction manual. For folks out there, any questions that you have as you're reviewing this information and thinking about how you will implement it, please send them our way. Every time we get a question, it allows us to think through it and identify how we need that information to be reported into the annual report. So send us anything, everything that you have our way. Lauren?
I don't think we can say enough how much your questions help us. Many of you have been emailing over the past couple months when going through the report, and you're getting stumped. It's very helpful for us to hear those questions so that we can work those into the guidance. Another question that's come in about the theory of change. Barbara earlier presented kind of the draft version and then the new updated, close to final version of the theory of change. So the question is about process is for finalizing that new version of the theory of change. And so I'm wondering if you would want to talk about that process.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think where we are, we're preparing because provided us with this devised version of the theory of change that was shared in the slide presentation. And what we're going to be doing, we're preparing to circulate a broad general update message related to performance measurement, what we'll call a Dear Colleague message that we plan to post on our website. And or we would include that theory of change, the updated version as an attachment, but before we would publish it, we will put that through kind of an internal clearance process. So until then, we're going to consider it, a sort of the word final from NASCSP, but we will to push it on our website. We're going to go through internal clearance process in our communications office. They may have some input, and so that's something we're in part working on as we speak. So that's at this point, I think the content that we're talking about, the components of that theory of change really haven't changed. It's really about presentation, how that comes forward, and does it meet sort of the presentation standards that we would want for CF to put on our website. But again, the content is really not changed in any significant way from what even those two versions that were shared in this presentation are, conveying the same basic information, slightly different graphic presentation.
Thank you, Seth. And now next, it's more a comment than a question that we've received. Wanted to share with others. This is in relation to Module 3 on community level work. And the comment is, thank you for specifying that you don't expect agencies to have a lot of community initiatives. I think some agencies think that everything they do is a community initiative and they are trying to fit in the box to report in Module 3. Wanting to thank us for emphasizing being community builders and not just service providers. It's in community actions, and community action agencies should be leading the creation and implementation of community initiatives. Barbara, did you want to add on to that comment?
Just thanks, Aaron, for the comment. I think we want to be very sure that what we're talking about is community change and community level work. We do a lot of things as community action agencies. We do a lot of things in the community that do partnerships and develop relationships that are specifically for the advancement of family and individual outcomes and not about community change. And so we really need to think about that. And we will be having a curriculum module about community level work that'll be coming out from the partnership pretty soon. And hopefully that will help people start to identify what is community level work and what should be reported here. But no agency is going to be doing a large number of initiatives just because of the complexity of the community level work. So we know that we expect to hear into a couple initiatives depending on the size of an agency, but we want to see what's actually being done at that level. So thanks for the comment.
And thanks, Erin, for your comment. We have a question that's come in about where you can find the annotated CSBG annual report. So we have it up on the slide here. If you look under the crosswalks section of the annual report page on our website, it's the second one listed there, annotated CSBG annual report. Not seeing any additional questions that have come in. If we did not answer a question that you may have entered, we will include that in an FAQ document, or we'll address it in some of the more Module 3 or Module 4 specific webinars that are coming up. We have these listed here on the screen. We've organized these, or kind of them out by time zones, so that it's a little bit easier and more accessible for you. We don't want anyone having to log into a webinar really early in the morning or really late at night. And hopefully we'll have a little bit smaller group so we can have more questions and kind of more back and forth. If you have not registered, please do, so you can find all of these links on our website on that CSBG annual report page. The next set that will come up will focus on Module 4, individual and family level, and Module 3 on community level. So really encourage you to log in if you haven't done so. You're not locked in per the time zone. Free register for whichever works best for your schedule. That brings us to the end of the webinar. It was recorded, and we will post this and have it available to our website so that you can share with others in your agency or office if they weren't able to be on. Want to thank everyone for being on the webinar with us today, especially OCS and the partnership for presenting with us. We really appreciate all of your partnership with us. And before we wrap up, just wanted to open it to any of our other presenters today if they'd like to make any closing comments.
This is just, again, thank you to all of you for joining. Thanks to NASCSP for hosting and for Action Partnership for all of the input. To follow up, again, I think there's some interesting discussion related to community level measures. That's certainly one of the new piece of this, and it is an area that it is going to be something that we'll be focusing here and over the next years. Our technical assistance efforts. It's a really important part of the community action model, and a part that we want to make sure we capture in our performance management system, along with all the important individual and family work and variety of services and strategies that are being implemented. So this, we have a lot of work ahead, and we know that each of you are facing important adaptations in your agencies, and we appreciate the work and engagement that is taking place across the CSBG network.
Thanks, Beth. And if there are other comments, we'll go ahead and wrap up for today. Thank you, everyone, so much for being with us, and we hope to see you on the future webinars.